All right.
So my question is, once you've mentioned, when we were talking about conceit, that
Mm-hmm.
at one point you realized that everything you do was um, conceit, conceited, kind of, you know? So what were your steps then when you realized that?
Uh, Actually, it peeled off in layers, and that the layers of peeling happened very slowly over a long period of time. The first layer of it was during the times when I was studying psychology, that there are within the guy who did this is named Tabby Kahler. He was a student of Eric Berne, who was a student of Freud. KB Taylor was a good friend of my trainer, Michael Brown, and Tabby Kahler would come and do conferences, or actually wind up being large group therapies. And that what he came across using Eric Berne's understanding of life scripts, he came to understand how these life scripts um, have um, the word that he used was drivers. And that as he researched these, and as more and more people research these, we find a lot of stuff in these things called drivers. I'll give all five of them to you. Try hard, please me, hurry up, be strong, be perfect.
Uh-oh.
And it,
Be
okay,
perfect.
right.
That rings a bell.
Uh huh. All right. Uh, Try hard is the most loser script at all, because it comes from expecting to fail. But you can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to fail and therefore I do nothing." No, we have to pretend to do something, and we have to work really hard at it, but we're expecting to fail anyway. Many students will get into that when they practice the piano. What they begin to find out is that everybody has all of these drivers, and that the way that they operate will lead eventually to a life script, or a way of living that can be predicted. And that there's two major ways of looking at that prediction. One is either that people are going to have a banal life, or banal is the other word for it, or they're going to have a tragic life. Both of these, by the way, are losers. And in fact, in that regard, you can see that a tragic life is because people are living with wrong view, but a banal life is because they're living their life with ordinary right view. And since the people who are capable of living their lives with supramundane right view are so unusual and rare inside of psychological circles, they didn't even understand that they should have included the lion or the winner along with those life scripts, because in fact we can change the life script. That was the whole point of Eric Berne talking about these life scripts, was that if we can understand which directions we're going, then we can start making changes to that. Now, in these five life drivers, the one that I clued in on and found out that my whole life had been driven by this driver was a hurry up driver. Now, hurry up gives anxiety. I have actually also seen, especially in the way that I was learning how to play the string bass under a lot of pressure in the U.S. Navy, coming as a tuba player, they wanted me to play string bass too. Not the same. Not the same. And so I got into try hard there, expecting to not be able to do it, but at least showing them a lot of blisters, showing, look how hard I tried. You, in fact, a lot of people in New York have that be perfect. A lot of people also have a be strong. The Marlboro Man and all of that ethos has in to do with the be strong. They're the ones also wind up in the military, the tough guys. And you can see how these drivers that happen on a moment by moment basis wind up creating our life story. That it's not the circumstances that life gives us that gives us our life story, it's the way we behave or feel or react to all of this stimulus. And that if we act in a pattern, then this pattern can be actually identified as these drivers. Now, the reality is that these five drivers that Eric Byrne and Tabby Kahler and Michael Brown were working with, um, it has a kind of a flaw because all it can do is point it out, but doesn't give any methods of um, ways for people to come out of them easily. To, and basically, what is lacking in psychology is mindfulness. I might have said this to you before, but here's possibly a way of looking at it. The world is full of good advice. Even Christianity has good advice. Even Mayor de Blasio had good advice. I think even once or twice Giuliani had good advice. Islam sometimes have good advice. The good advice of the Buddha is really, really top-notch, high-quality advice. Suffering, no suffering. But here's the point. Even though the world is full of good advice, we do not apply that good advice just at the moment when we need it most. Why is that? Because just when we need it most is most likely those points in times when we're going to be driven by these drivers. And you can see how conceit and restlessness are in fact the things that give the shading, or rather that's the power underneath these drivers, that labeling them the way that we do just gives them a kind of a shading. But underlying that, you can see that the be strong driver is in fact conceit, in the sense that I am stronger than others. The be perfect driver is also conceit, because I'm better than other people. All right? To where the hurry up driver is primarily processed out of um, anxiety, which is a kind of a restlessness. But they're very, very deeply interrelated that way. Okay? Uh, so the last one, which is kind of interesting, and that is the one I think that you and I have actually talked about, and that's the please me driver. And the please me driver is the victim's position that is often taken, especially by men when they're lying. Women will do the please me driver even when they're telling the truth. But with men, when they're into the please me drivers, it's generally because they're wanting other people to agree with them, and that they know that what they're actually saying, the truth is that it's not agreeable. And so they've got to add this extra stuff in it to make it agreeable. Okay, like raising the eyebrows, shaking the head, trying to get you to do the same gestures that I'm doing. Because if I can get you to nod your head, then somehow or another inside of your head, you're saying yes to the crap I'm putting out. All right, so that's the source of the please me driver, but it still has to do with competition. How is that true? It's competition in the sense of I'm better than you are because I want you to believe the lie. But then there's this big question mark about it is are you going to believe the lie? Because if you believe the lie, then I win the contest. And if you don't believe the lie, then I lose the contest. So you can also see that the try hard driver is expecting failure anyway. And so now what we're actually doing with the try hard driver is we're trying to get the other, the outsider, to come and have mercy on us, to give me a little bit of a better grade than I actually deserve. Look how hard I tried. Students do this a lot in school, but we also do it in our work. And it comes from the position of being a loser or being a victim or being incapable of doing the job, which is not the attitude of a Buddha at all. The attitude of a Buddha is can do. We can do this. Sure we can. We've trained our minds in such a way that this job is easy. All right, so that's the kind of a new attitude that we have. So if you see it in that regard, then um, the awakening of the Buddha is to come out of all of these drivers. But in the way that I learned about them, I came to understand that even though that the students could identify the drivers in each other, and it became kind of a game, so that we could see each other what we were doing, but it didn't seem to, let us say, bring this stuff to an end right away. And again, the reason for it is psychology is missing sati. Going back to that quality that if you can remember to watch anxiety, you can deal with it in that moment over and over and over again. But just because we've identified that we've got anxiety does not mean that we're seeing it every time it comes up. That's what sati allows us to do. That's the skill of sati, is to keep watching and keep watching and keep on alert and using the right effort that we need to do that so that whenever any of this stuff comes up, we can catch it. That skill may take years to develop, but there are things that we can do that can develop that skill very quickly. And that is by working through the body and working through the feelings to get down to that stuff. That is these are almost primordial, because you can see, in fact, primordial in the sense that it's right out of the instinct. And the instinct is basically the preservation instinct to keep us alive. And so there's this underlying, let us call it guardian, that is more like a wild animal than it is human. And so that guardian that we have actually in our society creates more trouble than it actually solves. Very rarely are we actually in danger. But it is out of that feeling of danger that gives us the need to compete with others, to be perfect, or to be strong and be tough against. Be strong for what reason? Why? Why be strong? You can see underlying the reason is that there is danger. Okay. Well, you can also do the same thing. Well, why be perfect? Bit of insight there, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, why be perfect? That's a lot of hard work. And not only that, but it's based upon uh, a drive or a need that is ignorant, based upon a deep old past, an old set of programs. But if we start thinking through with the wise part of the mind, start looking at it from a human perspective, there's no need. One of the things my dad said to me, which I think it was the most profound thing that my dad ever said, because it works right in here exactly. He said, "Work. Who's afraid of work? I can lay down and go to sleep right beside work." But if you see, he's changing the definition of the word work. And then what's really going on with the quality of the word work is that it's stuff that's difficult to do, but it's required. And so we feel almost forced out of a sense of fear to do something. And that our society supports that quite a lot in the sense of you don't work, you don't eat. Well, that's not true all over the world. And it's certainly not true here in Thailand. People go without working, but they don't go without eating. They got a big family to support them. But in the West, we have almost lost that. So that every individual person has got to get on that treadmill and perform. The society requires it. But then there is the sutta that the Buddha has. In fact, this is one of my, I like the whole group. It's all out of a group of suttas called the Suttanipata. And the Suttanipata is known to be the oldest of the literature. It's so old, in fact, that even Paticca is there and can be recognized, but it's not recognized either with the label of Paticca, nor does it have all of the completeness of the later teachings. It's just the beginnings of the teachings, as you can see, the really deep parts. And in there is a sutta, and basically it's this: the guy is walking down a hot road. Actually, he's running. He's running down the road. He's got work to do. All right. And he was running down the road and he's saying, "Why am I running when I could walk?" And so he settles down to a walk. And as he's walking down the road, he sees a shade tree beside the tree. And he said, "Why am I walking in the hot sun when I can go stand in the shade?" And when he gets to the shade tree and is standing and cooling off, and he says, "Well, why am I standing when I could sit down?" All right. That's basically that, in his own way, that's the be perfect driver. Getting out on the road and just making my life perfect is so much work. Running down the road trying to catch up with something, and I have no clue about what I'm trying to catch up with. But when I do, I'll be perfect. I'll have it. And so this is very, very deep stuff that we can begin to see. But the quality then is that you're using the sati, the skills that you've already been developing in meditation, so that you can see this stuff easy. You can see it quickly. You can see it when you get in a hurry. You want to continue to watch the body because both of this anxiety, the anxiety that we can experience in the body, is connected to both restlessness and the conceit or the comparing ourselves with others. Okay, so you can see in fact, in a way, the the try hard driver is the one where we are comparing ourselves to others and expecting to lose and are wanting someone else to come and um, have mercy upon us. One of the ways that they can have mercy upon us is telling us it's okay to take a break. Well, if the try-hard driver guy already knows he's going to is going to fail, why doesn't he take a break? Why is he in there doing it like that? Okay, the reason for it is because of the anxiety that we experience from this within, that's built upon the self-preservation instinct. That in this case is fear. That he's afraid of the repercussions, and he's still expecting to not be able to perform, and therefore he's expecting to get that punishment. And so now the try hard is like a big lie that comes in to try to get mercy for, because we can't hide the evidence that we're a failure. But what we want to do is paint it gold in some way so that we can get at least a pat on the head. Look how hard you tried. Or we'll give you an extra point. I know that you deserve an F, but we'll give you an E minus just because you're a good boy. You try hard, all right? So this is a quality that you can see even in the try hardest competition. Certainly in Be Strong and Be Perfect, you can really see the competition in there. And that then the point is that, well, where is that? The source of that stuff is back into the tensions and anxieties. And in fact, if you look at it even deeper, you can see that, it comes out of the reptilian brain. It comes out of the self-preservation instinct. And in all cases, you can take a deep, happy sigh and say, things are safe now. There is no problem to solve. There is no perfection to be had. There's nothing to be strong against. Okay, so this is the way that we begin to do it. But in that regard, these drivers are just very, very clear, deep insights that psychologists have had working together and figuring out the human mind that fit precisely into the teachings of the Buddha. The major distinction is that within the method of the Buddhism, not only do we have a way of seeing these things, we have a way of seeing them over and over and over and over and over again. So we begin to whittle away at that stuff until we bring it down under control. To where with psychology, they don't have that quality of meditation, of looking and never mind, come back and look again and look again and look again. All right. So going along with that, now, so here's your question in answer. In the beginning, I could see anxiety. I had it labeled as a hurry up driver, and I still see it. But I normally see it now in retrospect, in the sense of, I used to. Like, I used to, every time I would travel, I would go into states of anxiety. When I was really young, and one of the things that I came out of when I was a monk was, I used to get anxiety when I was eating food. But by taking on a few techniques, like making sure that the food is really chewed well, and the other one is to make sure that I'm the last one to eat. If I'm eating food with other people, I'm watching everybody's plate, and that I know that I've done successful when my plate is half full of food and everybody else is finished. Then I know that I'm practicing correctly. All right, so these are things that help deal with that anxiety, especially in the realm of that hurry up that came from restlessness. Also, being able to deal with it, because restlessness is very curious in the way that it is both a hindrance in the mind and also an underlying tendency or a deep fetter, that in fact it rises up. Now, what we experience in the mind as the hindrance of restlessness is um, that the mind is just wandering, scatterbrained, jumping around. That in fact, for many centuries now, Buddhist meditation students have been calling it monkey mind. Literally, the mind jumps from one object to another, just like a monkey jumps from one branch of a tree to another and over to the other tree, and right down the hill she goes, jumping around. So, this is the way that the mind operates when it has this quality of restlessness. But the quality of restlessness always has a quality of remorse, so that when the hindrances are listed, they actually always list the two words of restlessness and remorse together, which is an indication that if we start jumping from tree to tree, we're eventually, very, in fact, within 5, 6, 7 jumps, are going to hit a rotten branch. We're going to hit something that we don't like. We're going to have a memory that's an ouch, a mental ouch, a wince. And this is the remorse that we have, that we can always find something wrong with the past. I mean, it wasn't perfect. You've been striving your whole life to make things perfect, and yet your past is imperfect, and you know it. And so that's actually, you can see in that regard then, is that the restlessness is actually, in a way, kind of going back and cleaning up the messes so that things can get perfect finally. And that's where the remorse is. But what that does, it keeps us in the cycle of the past and the future. I look in the past, I find something wrong, I make a plan to fix it. And that's the way that the mind is stuck in this state of restlessness. And so the best thing to do is to catch it every time we can, to come out of that and come to this present moment. This present moment has got no worries, no troubles. Past and future, very dangerous places. And that is through that restlessness that keeps us there, as well as its twin brother, conceit. They're almost identical. Restlessness happens in the sense of I need protection by getting something done, and conceit is things are dangerous and I need to get something done, and I use that the reference point or the criteria is based upon someone else. In other words, I have to do it better than he does it, and that's my goal. I don't have to look for it being just an adequate job or good enough job. I got to do it better than he did. Even if he failed, it's okay to fail so long as my failure is better than his failure. So this is the way that it works with that is that in a way, one is diffuse and the other one is personalized, or what is the word? An, uh, anthropomorphized. Do you know what I mean by that? Okay,
Yes.
so humans have been anthropomorphizing nature, from angry oceans to gods in the air to tree spirits, all kinds of stuff. What we're doing with conceit is we're anthropomorphizing restlessness by putting it onto a face or a person, an individual. Okay? And so, if that individual, for instance, challenges us, insults us, or whatever like that, then we start into this conceit of comparing ourselves to that person in the sense of, is he right? Is his criticism correct? Am I, in fact, a bad person because of his criticism? Or is he wrong? Am I as good as he is? You can see all of these questions start to be to coming up. Um, there is a sutta number 63, and the sutta is, I forget the name of it. It's not even an important one, but it's in the Majjhima Nikaya number 63, and the name of the sutta is the name of the young monk who comes to the Buddha and says, you know, when I became a monk with you, I came with some questions, and I've never gotten those questions answered. And basically, the questions were about the kinds of questions a young monk would ask, like, who am I, and what was I in the past, and what am I going to be in the future, and all of that kind of inappropriate stuff. And it can also be the kind of questions about rebirth, reincarnation, um, questions of gods, heavens, hells, all of that kind of stuff. And the monk said then to the Buddha that if you don't give me the answer to these questions, I'm going to disrobe. And here's what the Buddha's answer was, and that is that if you were shot by an arrow and your friend saw you getting shot by that arrow, and so they call a physician, and the physician is there, and the physician, and that this arrow has been smeared with an ancient kind of poison, and so it needs to come out. But here I am laying with this arrow stuck in my chest, and they started pulling the arrow out. I want to know who shot me. I want to know why he shot me. I want to know what kind of arrow this is. I want to know what kind of poison it is. I want all of this information this young monk was asking. And the Buddha says, you need to take the arrow out. Because if you wait to get all of the answers to all of your questions before you take the arrow out, you'll surely die. Well, there was a time then when, let us say this, with just giving you the story, there was a time when I was in competition with another monk, but it was at a time when both of us had already disrobed. But he was well known, famous for teaching, and so I had a lot of respect for him. And yet he rejected me. So he's over there shooting me with these insults arrows in the sense of rejecting donations and refusing to answer emails. This is the kind of thing. But uh, the mind was actually capable of seeing that he actually intended to insult. If I had done donations and had never heard back from him, I wouldn't know. Or if he'd have said thank you and kept the money, then that would have been okay. But by rejecting the money, he's taking an action. So now I'm feeling bad, as if I've got this arrow in. And when I recognize that arrow was the tension and the anxiety of my conceit, of why would he do that? And that gave great freedom to pull that arrow out. Aha! What a relief. Okay. So anytime that you're feeling insulted by someone, recognize that it's our own arrow that we're shot with. Our job is to get that arrow out. Now, the Buddha also in another sutta talks about the arrow in the sense that there are two of them. One is the original shot from the outside world, the first arrow, but then not healing that arrow, not pulling it out, makes it worse. It's almost like a second arrow. That we need to pull these arrows out and we need to see them as soon as they come. So this is how we deal with conceit, is by being there for it, because in fact this kind of insult that I'm talking about, that doesn't happen often. We're talking about once in 20 years or so. But when it hits you, you got to be ready for it.
So the way you responded was you noticed that you feel offended because you are comparing yourself to him when you shouldn't really be comparing, and just whatever happened.
And all of the stuff that did happen that was a happening that had happening kind of stuff around with it was all inside, and it had nothing to do with him. That's the way that we have to start understanding all of our the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, because the world is full of slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. If I stand up to, and get wounded, get shot and wounded, that's my own damn fault. I need to keep my head down. That's the way that and so this is what mindfulness is about. You have possibly seen movies of things like this. The warrior is standing next to the king, and from way over there, somebody shoots an arrow. And the warrior grabs that arrow right out of the air before it gets the king. And he's holding it in just such a way that you know that that arrow would have killed the king if he had not caught it right out of the air, right? That's the kind of way we're going to have to deal with some of that stuff. Some of it is going to come really quick, and we need to be ready for it, so that you can grab that thing right out of the air, because things are going to happen like that. People are going to insult you. There's going to be automobile accidents. There's going to be running into telephone poles. There's going to be stuff on the sidewalk. I mean, New York City is just absolutely full of slings and arrows that can be outrageous fortunes if we don't step out of the way. And so this is what that training is all about, the training of the mind, so that when um, the internal uh, old stuff manifests itself, we can see it and recognize it, that this is on the inside, that I cannot blame the outside for what's happening on the inside. And by dealing with it directly, we become the winner. Because see, while I'm dealing with something on the outside, I'm in competition with it on the outside. Do I win or does it win? And so winning and losing is a flaky game. But if I begin to deal with it on the inside, then I'm guaranteed to be the winner, because we're developing the skills for that. And not only the guarantee, but that guarantee is also the kind of eradication of doubt, that we're no longer full of doubt. We know that no matter how obstructed the mind is, we can clean it out. We can come back to this present moment. So when this conceit comes, then no matter how wounded I am by me being rejected by this really big, powerful teacher up here, and no matter how bad I feel, I can see that feeling, I can pull that arrow out, and I can have a nice belly laugh.
Sometimes it takes a while, though. You really have to work on it. Um, you know, right? It's not an instant thing.
Nope. But it's worthwhile. It really is worthwhile to stay mindful, to watch, and in fact to wake up the human mind, because as you can tell, all of this stuff of conceit and restlessness comes deep out of the reptilian part of the human brain, and it is primary programming. It is instinctual programming, and it is dangerous programming because it's too limited a program. So the more we have the frontal cortex in gear, the more we have that part of the brain turned on, then the happier our life will be, because we can watch where we're going. Be mindful, be alert that things are going to happen. Anxiety, perfections, tryhards, hurry ups, all of that stuff is in there, and that it's coming up, inappropriately. And that's what gives rise to lives of humans that are tragic. But you don't have to live a tragic life. You can have a masterfully wonderful life by watching what you're doing. That's why it's always a good idea for me to ask the students, "How's your practice?"
Mhm.
Because that's all about the skill development. Those four primary skills that we've talked about so many times: sati, right view, right effort, and right attitude. Because you can see, for instance, with the try-hard driver, that's the wrong attitude. Boy, is it the wrong attitude. So it's a loser's attitude. Well, so is the please me. That's also a loser's attitude because it's got lies, deceit, and other things like that. You can also see that the hurry up. There's no reason to hurry up. Why is there hurry up? Because underlying that, there is someone in there saying, hurry up, come on, you're not adequate. You've got to be up to this grade at this speed before. And, and this is so funny with that hurry up driver because I remember in school when it had effects. There was this one episode that I'll tell you about, though it happened a lot. The teacher, Mr. Horton, gives us a pop quiz in algebra on Friday, and he writes it up on the board, or it's actually written on the board when they come into the room, and so there's 10 questions, and so we're up there doing like that. I finish faster than everybody else, and I get up and I run and put my paper up first, and people notice. And then I come back and sit down, and then I'm looking at that, and I said, I want to redo on one of those. And so I run back up to the desk, grab my paper. Now everybody is howling with laughter at me. And I come back to my table, and I change it, and then I run back up there, and so I'm still the first in line. But now I've made a laughing stock of myself. Why was it necessary for me not just to get a good grade, but to also have the one that turns the paper in first? That was the drive that was built in, that also um, has affected my life in many, many different ways. In ways now that it doesn't at all, but it took a while for me to recognize that it was driven out of an anxiety that I could feel, which is exactly the same feeling of anxiety as when my donations are refused. It's the same feeling. But because of the circumstances of it, basically what we're talking about, the chemicals of the brain are the same for these two different kinds of circumstances. One is we'll call conceit, and the other one we'll call restlessness, but in fact, they're the same thing, just one's been anthropomorphized, and the other one is more natural. But they're the same. But the Buddha really does divide them up as to two separate fetters because we have to see them each individually to recognize, to not compete with others. Now, basically, where people compete with others mostly is in what we call malicious gossip, which Eric Berne labels as a game. He's actually got several games built around malicious gossip. One of them is let's you and him fight. And another one is let's pull a fast one on Joey. So playing tricks on other people, or basically the most important one, you can see two old ladies in the old days out doing their hanging out their laundry, and within a few minutes they're standing close to each other, one on one side and one on the other side of the fence. And who are they talking about? They're talking about the lady who lives down there. Yak, 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 yak. Gossip, 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 gossip. And basically, what they're playing games with, it has to do with you and me are better than she is. That's the game of having a conversation so that we can feel better about ourselves by putting down a third person. But if it gets really malicious, if person A can convince person B to go have a fight with person C, let's you and him fight.
This is so common though, not the fighting part, but before it gets malicious, you would say, 90% of conversations I overhear are kind of like that.
Yes, hear how common it is. It really is. It's very human common for this kind of gossip that has to do with conceit and comparing ourselves to others. So now that you're hearing it and we're talking about it, you can be on guard to listen to this stuff so that you do not get caught into it. You can see that as just slings and arrows of outrageous fortunes. They're gossiping. Come gossip with them. No, don't go gossip with them. So now we've got this question kind of answered that is going to take a while, and part of it is going to be that it's because it's going to be sometimes a long time between events. Uh, and so we don't have a chance to practice it. But basically, what happens is that when these events occur, it's not going to be just bang, the arrow hits one time, but literally every time you think of that person who has insulted you, or every time you think about that insult, we get wounded again, over and over and over again. We keep hitting ourselves with those same arrows over, and every time we do, we blame him because we remember him saying the insult, but now we're saying it to ourselves over and over and over again. All right. But when we recognize that, wait a minute, I'm the one who's shooting myself now with this arrow, now we can stop it. And in that regard, you can see that that restlessness or that conceit that happened when he shot me now is stuck in the mind in the form of a hindrances in the sense of restlessness because I keep bringing it up. I won't let it go. It's not resolved. Not until I find a really, really cool way to insult him back. And he knows that he's been insulted, and he proves it to me. And after he's proven to me that I've really gotten him back with a really super cool insult, then it's over. At least that's the way that we think. The reality is that the way for it to be over is for us to drop it. That in fact, dropping it or letting it go is the only way that we do rise above that insult. Insulting him back is not going to work. That's just warfare.
This just happened to me this week. Someone was kind of rude to me out of the blue, and I was, the mind keeps trying to come up with how should I respond to hurt this person back. And I was watching how it kept like circling, circling, circling. It took a while. It took about half an hour to kind of dissolve, and then you realize, oh, that's ridiculous. Why would you want to, even get involved? But in the heat of it, it takes effort to not engage and
Exactly. Okay, so now what you just labeled for yourself, remember this well. You're now down to 30 minutes. You remember that at one time you could have suffered over that one incident for 2 weeks. And now you got it down to 30 minutes. That's an improvement.
well, the improvement is that before I would have snapped back something, mean. And
Yes,
then,
but you
then I
wouldn't
would
have
have
forgotten it. You might have opened your mouth and really unloaded, but you wouldn't have forgotten it. It would have burned on.
yeah,
And
I
not
would
only
have,
that, but she would have burned on with your remark.
uh, I can see how that would have created a suffering in this person and me. And then I would feel bad that I did that. After, a day, you would be thinking, oh, this was a ridiculous situation. Why did I even get involved?
The answer is because there was something deep inside that told you that this was a life or death situation, that you were in danger.
It was really silly. Silly situation, but yeah, I guess.
Well, the frontal cortex now recognizes that's ridiculous. This wasn't dangerous at all. Well, then why does the reptilian brain do that? The answer is because that's its job. It's an on off mechanism.
Yeah,
You're
it
either
kind of
not in
was.
danger or you are. And when she says that, you're in danger.
It was perceived as aggression, I guess. But very silly aggression, but still.
Right. Even if there was no aggression intended,
Right. Oh, I'm sure it was just.
the reptilian brain of every one of us will take that as aggression because that's the job of the reptilian brain. That's what this whole meditation is all about, is to let the frontal cortex, let the wise part of the mind start to make these kind of decisions, which means we, in that instant, or let us say 30 minutes later after that instant, the frontal cortex has gained control. And you say, wait a minute, look at this ridiculous thing. All right. So next time it'll be 20 minutes. Maybe after that it'll be 5 minutes. Maybe the next time after that it'll be like, oh, I see what this is. And then someday you'll say, I used to feel like that way when I would get insulted. So that's the way that it works. It slowly over time, and with these kind of insults, they don't happen as often as a lot of the other stuff, like feelings that we have. But you can also recognize that that feelings are mixed up with this. That the deeper you understand and know feelings, you'll actually be getting down to this core conceit that's there, that's built in as a self-preservation mechanism. It's got uh, far less work to do than it was designed to do. The self-preservation mechanism in humans was designed and grew up in a time when things were really dangerous, with mammoths and saber-toothed tigers and bigger people and all kinds of things. Dangerous times. And it's not dangerous anymore. But we have to think straight in order to realize, oh, I can relax. Now, here's the thing. During all of that time, society was also being constructed one layer at a time, 1 year at a time, one generation at a time, more and more and more and more structure has been put in there. And one of the advantages of that structure is physical safety. But one of the things that has not been added was psychological safety. This is where the teachings of the Buddha comes in, so that we can begin to take control away from that fearsome creature that's been keeping us alive. Without the self-preservation instinct, you wouldn't be here. So we have to at least congratulate it. Thank you for keeping me alive. However, you're overworked. And in a way, bringing the frontal cortex into gear, waking it up, getting it fired up, getting it going, takes a little bit of effort. This is why we want to have the breathing done consciously. that the more that we practice just keeping the breath either in the foreground or just a little bit in the background, so that while we're practicing, we always note that the breathing is there. Because that's our anchor to bring us back to this present moment. And so, one of the things I might have told you before, in all of the Anapanasati, only the first two steps use the verb of understanding. All of the other steps of Anapanasati, the verb is train, to train. Okay, as I'm watching the breath in and out, I gladden the mind. As I breathe in and out, as I'm experiencing breathing out, in and out, I'm observing the mind. I'm watching the mind. Eventually, we're watching the feelings. So this is the way that we practice. So the more the more often you come back to the breath, more and more and more often, the better. Especially if every time you come back to the breath, you do so with a great, big, happy, deep, I love this present moment kind of mental attitude. And so we practice all of those things. But then we want to kind of leave the breath right there on the surface so that we don't forget about it, so that the breath is there and can become a strong, deep breath at any point in time. And here's part of the reason why we want that is because the MRI systems, they've learned that conscious breathing, watching your breath and controlling your breath, is a sure sign that the frontal cortex is in gear, is operating. That normally the breathing is controlled by an area of the brain that's just below the part that keeps the heart beating. But the breathing is kind of special in that regard, is that we can either leave it on automatic pilot, and the reptilian brain will keep us alive, it'll keep us breathing, though it may not give us all of the air that we need or all of the oxygen that we need to fully operate the frontal cortex. All the breathing is needing to do is to keep the reptilian brain going. But when we bring our mind into focus by breathing consciously, that actually lights up that frontal cortex. But taking that deep breath then gives us the oxygen that we need to actually fire up that frontal cortex. So having the breath consciously is going to make you more human than forgetting about your breath. More human, more human. Keep breathing, keep watching the breath.
You know, I have a related question actually. I was going to ask you after, but since you're talking about this, have you ever had this feeling that in meditation you're kind of on a roll? You're in the period where there's always something happening that's deeper, more than you've had before, and I am in this kind of period right now where I can't wait to like go and meditate some more. In general, do you think it's you know how Goenka says you have to meditate at least 2 hours a day, 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening? Do you think it's definitely beneficial to like kind of amp it up and
Yes, except that I don't think that it needs to be done in one full hour session. 2 hours a day, let us say, uh, that's going to be 12 10-minute periods. And 12 10-minute periods would be a whole lot better than 2 1 hour settings. You have the same amount of practice time, but one of them is spreading it out all throughout the day, which is what we're actually looking for. Generally, what happens with people who are practicing just once a day for an hour, that means that 23 hours they're not practicing at all, which means they're back into the reptilian brain completely. What we want to develop a practice of is so that we can come out of the old way of doing things, the reptilian way, and come into the human way as more and more often as we can think of it.
Let's say I'm doing that throughout the day also, but the official, like today I meditated because it's a weekend. In the morning I did an hour and a half, and
Uh
it passed as if it was, I don't know, 20 minutes. Because
huh.
I was so enjoying what was happening.
That's exactly the right way. Congratulations. Keep doing that. As in fact, that's the way that's the whole thing. That if your meditation becomes enjoyable, it will become part of your life. The Buddha talks about it in the sense of that the practice is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end. But many students, when they start to practice, it doesn't feel like that it's good yet. So they're hoping that it's going to get good. You've already gone through the good in the beginning. Now you're going to the good in the middle part. And that's great. So yes, that's the whole thing is that the more that you enjoy this, then the more dedicated to the path that you'll become. Also, the more you enjoy it, the more benefit that you're getting out of it. And because you're actually seeing that this stuff works, the doubt is eradicating. It's slowly coming down, leaving you with a state of comfort and ease that you've got in your life now that you didn't have before you started this practice. So, yes, it's all kind of coming together, and that the coming together of it has to do with being able to live in this present moment more and more often. This is why the Buddha actually says in the suttas that the first jhana is the path to enlightenment. And what he's actually implying there, that anyone who can stay in first jhana all the time, that's all they need. That's enlightenment itself, is staying in first jhana. Why is that? Because in first jhana, the mind is free from hindrances completely. No hindrances. That's wonderful. That's actually quite delicious. It's very, very comfortable and happy to be free from it. But there's other qualities, and that quality is the applied and sustained thought. So that, like we've talked about it before about reading. Can you actually read a book from cover to cover? Well, you can, but only if you're really interested and really curious and really want to know what's in that book. But when the book becomes me, in the sense of all of the body, all of the feelings, now the curiosity is there. I want to see what's going on all the time. I want to read this thing and really pay attention to it. And in that regard, we start developing more and more of be here now, and that more and more of be here now is nothing but first jhana, where the mind is free from the hindrances of the past and the future, and we can be here now so that if anxiety comes up, we can see it coming up.
And you know how I told you in meditation I get those piti, the movements, like
Mm-hmm.
involuntary movements. I forgot to tell you last time, right after we were talking about eating, how to eat, and
Yes.
I was really inspired, and I did particularly mindful and slow eating lunch, I think it was, and I got the piti while eating because I guess it was like an eating meditation. you know I got like those electric like kind of like movements inside the head. And
Mm-hmm. Yes. These you could call them energy flows or channels. We don't really have the right kind of language there, but what you could say is that this is opening up of old blockages, so that the neurons are beginning to find new pathways, and things like that. So throughout your practice, even in years to come, you can actually think about those feelings, those sensations, and they'll start up. When I start to describe them to students, I always they come right up. I can feel them. If I talk about the hair on the arms standing up, goosebumps. There they go. um, so this will happen, uh, and it's, let us say, it's indicative of progress, but not much more than that.
But
That
it
we
was
don't.
interesting, yeah, that during eating, it also came up.
Uh huh. Exactly. Exactly. Must have been pretty delicious food.
No, but
No.
it's just the way I was doing it. It was so different.
That sounds great. I'm really pleased to hear that you're continuing on. When I first saw you had come online, my original thought would to be to do a kind of a grand review. But what we've done instead is much more of an in-depth review of the details we've been covering kind of recently. Uh, and I really appreciate that you're actually working with and experiencing this stuff and seeing it operate online. For instance, having last week, having that issue of conceit right there so we can begin to see it. That's great. So continue on with this. And yes, if you're enjoying long sitting times, then uh, continue to do that. But also continue to do it right throughout the day, anytime that you can think of it. Anytime that you can think of it. Um, here's something that you can start to peg certain movements as a point of mindfulness. One of them that I use is getting up out of a chair. That when I stand up, see, many times, think about it, start watching how you get out of a chair. Almost always, when people get out of a chair, it's because they're going someplace. So the question is, can you stand up or get out of a chair and stand for 1, 2, 3, 4 seconds before you take your first step? This will help those little things, those little Dhamana moments. And so this is one of them that I've used is just to don't get up with the intention of going someplace, but rather get up with the intention to stand up and stop. And now we go and do what we were doing. This is kind of just another little point of practice for you. Not that you have to do it every time, but that when you do remember it, you can take a bit of joy. Aha, I remembered that time. I'm going to stand up and I'm not going to walk. I'm just going to stand up and wait, and then I'll take a step.
Right. I'll try
Fit-
that.
Fiddle with that. How many times do you get out of a chair a day? 20, 40, 60 times?
A lot.
A
Yes.
lot. Okay, so now you've got a lot to practice.
Thank
It'll
you.
look funny. If you start watching people how they get out of a chair, and you'll see that they get out of the chair with certain movements so that they're propelling themselves to go. So your job is now is to going to stand up out of your chair and stand. 1, 2, 3, got it. And then you can,
I'll
and
try.
that will help with these little nirvana moments. We want these more and more, these moments of awareness to stop and to bring that frontal cortex into gear again. So these are little mindfulness tools that we can use that's going to really begin to wake things up. There's other things that you can do for yourself. One would be refrigerator door. When you open the refrigerator door, you stop and you take a deep breath and you say, Thank you, Mr. Refrigerator. I'm really happy you're here. Now let me see what you have inside. So little things like that. Another one, and Willie talks about this, that he really enjoys a shower because now when he showers, it's a nibbana shower.
Yeah, I've realized, and I've been working with this for a while, that I haven't ever taken a shower where I was 100% present. The mind tends to wander a lot in the shower for some reason. I don't know why. So I have not achieved the great presence while showering yet.
Uh huh.
But I notice when the mind wanders away.
Right. Pay attention to the water hitting your body. Pay attention to the splashingness. It will actually bring pity. It really does for many people. And
Mm,
it doesn't even matter the temperature of the shower. So
mm,
whatever shower temperature you like, really enjoy it.
mm. Yeah.
So
Um,
these are the kinds of things that you need to do to start bringing your presence more and more present, more and more often.
I'll try those. Thank you.
All right, good. Well, I'll see you in a week or two then.
Yes, quick question. You haven't been
Yes,
posting any new videos. I missed the updates from your other students.
I will do that. Here is the reason. The nice Lenovo went belly up in early this month, in early May. New one is on its way. Will be here probably middle of next week. This machine is old and slow and has so little memory in it and a mechanical hard drive so that I can basically only run one program at a time.
Mm. But you
I
know,
actually have to
yeah.
close down Chrome in order to get Skype to work. It's because of that reason that I have not been posting the videos, is because of this machine. Later next week, a whole lot of stuff is going to start happening.
Great. I am addicted to the video. I love all of your students. I feel like they're family now. I like to
Yes,
follow progress.
that's exactly what we're looking for. We're looking for a family connection. Yes. In fact, this week on this porch, we have had Pablo and Tun and Brenda. Now Tun is from Estonia, but he lives at Wat Suan. Pablo has been doing long retreats here. He lives in Paris, and uh, Brenda also stays at Wat Suan. So yeah, we have a lot of people coming in and out of the house here. And that we all recognize that there is a forming a budding community along with Danny and Frederick and Ferdinand and Martin and Dan. And
Yeah, I
we
feel
got
like they're all my little brothers. I know so much about about them. um,
that's great. I'm really pleased that many of them will allow this stuff to be online because the likelihood is that the Dhamma will stay on YouTube and be available for people in a way that we can't get it from a book. That having these online chats with people, I think, are going to be eventually quite valuable and may even be valuable to people after I'm dead, because that's going to happen too. In fact, if we're lucky, we'll get a video of that. Hey, folks, it's time to croak. Watch me croak. No, I'm not going to do a croak like that. I'm going to do it like.
like a Tibetan monk.
uh, Actually, I was thinking more of a Kung Fu Panda.
Right. I watched all the three parts of Kung Fu Panda because of you mentioning it. I watched it with my husband. We really enjoyed it.
Yes, good. I'm glad. Yes, there's a lot of Dhamma in some of these entertainment things. All right. Well, Natalie, thank you very much. I will see you in a week or two.
Yes, thank you so much, and have a great day.
Yeah, well, all right. We'll see
Bye.
what we can do with that.